I transferred $120 million to my daughter Emily's account at 4:12 p.m. on a Thursday. The confirmation screen stayed open on my phone for several seconds longer than necessary. I don't rush large numbers. I verify them. Routing number. Receiving institution. Account holder, Emily R. Miller. Amount, $120 million. 00. I pressed confirm. The wire moved through 3 internal authorizations, my holding company, the trust buffer, and finally her operational account. Clean. Immediate. Irreversible. We were sitting in her new house outside Boston, a structure of glass and limestone that looked more like a venture capital rendering than a home. Floor-to-ceiling panels framed a backyard too symmetrical to be natural. An infinity pool cut across the property like a surgical incision. The interior smelled faintly of new construction and money. She was smiling. Not casually. Not softly. Radiant. "We're finally aligned," she said. "No more friction. No more delay. We're on the same team now." Aligned. An interesting word. Her fingers tapped lightly on the marble island, a rhythm I'd noticed when she was anxious as a child. She used to do that before piano recitals. Before exams at Stanford University. Before investor presentations in her 20s. But this didn't feel like performance anxiety. It felt like anticipation. She reached for a crystal decanter and poured 2 glasses of single malt. I recognized the bottle. I had given it to her for her 32nd birthday. 25-year-old Scotch. Meant for measured moments. "To scale," she said, lifting her glass. "To durability," I replied. We touched rims. At that exact moment, Linda, the housekeeper, walked past us toward the hallway. She kept her eyes down. Her posture never changed. But as she passed behind Emily's shoulder, she murmured, barely audible. "Don't touch it. Switch the glasses." There was no tremor in her voice. No drama. Just urgency compressed into a whisper. I did not freeze. I did not widen my eyes. I did not look at Linda. I smiled instead. "You always pour heavier for me," I said casually. "Let me try yours." I reached forward and rotated the glasses, a smooth motion disguised as paternal teasing. Emily laughed. "Dad, it's the same bottle." She lifted the glass that had been intended for me. And she drank. The first sip went down normally. The second caught. A fractional hesitation in her throat. I watched her carotid pulse. Years in logistics taught me pattern recognition. You study movement. Timing. Irregularity. Her pulse accelerated. A faint flush crept up her neck. "You okay?" I asked. "It's strong," she said, blinking. "Wow." Her pupils dilated slightly. Not alcohol dilation, too fast. Too pronounced. Her breathing shifted from even to shallow. Within 60 seconds, her fingers lost tension around the stem. The glass tilted. I caught it before it shattered. Her knees softened. I supported her weight and eased her onto the sofa. "Stay with me," I said evenly. Linda had stopped in the hallway. She was pale now. Emily's heart rate visibly raced beneath her skin. A tremor moved through her hands. I dialed emergency services without raising my voice. "My daughter is experiencing acute cardiac distress," I said calmly. Female, 32. Possible ingestion of unknown sedative compound. Rapid onset. We are at. I gave the address precisely. While we waited, I moved deliberately. I separated the glasses on the counter. I photographed both with my phone, timestamps visible. I wrapped the rim of the glass she drank from in a linen napkin, avoiding contamination. I capped the decanter. I noted the fill level. No panic. Documentation first. Emotion later. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes. Emily was semi-conscious by then, disoriented, heart racing at a level that concerned even me. They administered stabilization medication immediately and transferred her onto a stretcher. As they wheeled her out, she looked at me, confused, frightened. Not angry. Not exposed. Frightened. That detail stayed with me. At Massachusetts General Hospital, the attending physician confirmed what my instincts already suggested. There's a sedative compound present, he said. Not alcohol alone. Something with cardiovascular amplification. In the right dosage, it could induce arrhythmia. In a man my age? I asked. He looked at me carefully. Yes. I handed him the wrapped glass. He raised an eyebrow. I believe in preserving variables, I said. My name is Richard Miller. I am 61 years old. 3 years ago, I sold my warehouse logistics network headquartered in Denver for just over $430 million. After structured exits, tax allocations, charitable commitments, and long-term placements, I retained roughly $300 million under layered control. I am not confused. I am not declining. I am not financially naive. After my wife died 5 years ago, I narrowed my world to one priority, Emily. I financed her education. I absorbed her first failed venture without commentary. I funded her second startup, the one she called transformative. I never asked for board control. Never demanded oversight. Trust, I believed, was a gift. But the past 6 months had contained irregularities. Closed-door calls. A lawyer she described only as temporary. References to deadlines that can't slip. And a phrase that repeated twice in 1 week. Once this clears, everything shifts. Everything shifts. I noticed. I said nothing. Trust can be strategic. In the hospital corridor, Linda finally spoke. I heard them, she said quietly. 2 days ago. Miss Emily and a man on speaker. They said, heart cocktail. That it would look natural. That stress plus alcohol would be enough. At his age. At his age. I did not react externally. How certain are you? I asked. I'm certain. I nodded once. You did the right thing. She swallowed. I couldn't let it happen. In that moment, clarity replaced shock. The $120 million transfer had not been a gesture of alignment. It had been a trigger. If the glass had not been switched, I would likely have suffered cardiac failure within hours. A grieving father. A high-stress transaction. A private residence. Clean narrative. And with my passing, the remaining structured assets, including majority control of my holding company, would accelerate into Emily's hands. Efficient. Elegant. Irreversible. I returned to my hotel suite overlooking the Charles River that night and opened my laptop. I began pulling logs. Transaction timestamps. Sub-accounts. Escrow routing schedules. If this was coordinated, there would be movement planned within 48 hours of the transfer. I found something. A pre-authorization draft for an offshore liquidity vehicle scheduled to activate at 9 a.m. 2 days later. The beneficiary was a Cayman-based fund I had never approved. That was when any residual doubt ended. This was not a misunderstanding. This was architecture. And architecture leaves blueprints. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. Emily believed I was aging. Believed grief had softened me. Believed experience dulls with time. What she failed to understand is this. Silence is not weakness. It is assessment. And I had just beg asterisk n mine. I did not confront Emily the next morning. At 8:03 a.m., the hospital called. She was stable. Elevated cardiac stress, chemical interference confirmed, but no permanent damage. She would be discharged within 48 hours. I thanked them. Then I began moving. The first call was to a man I had used once before, quietly, during a hostile acquisition 15 years ago. Samuel Howard. Private financial crimes analyst. Based in Phoenix. Discreet. Methodical. Unemotional. He answered on the second ring. Richard. I need a full-spectrum review, I said. Personal transfer, $120 million. Potential accelerated estate positioning. Possible coordination with medical event. There was a pause. That's not small, he said. It's not. Are we talking about internal betrayal? Yes. Another pause. Send me access credentials to a mirrored portal. Read only. And don't confront anyone. I won't. By noon, Sam had temporary encrypted access to 3 layers of my financial structure, the holding company, the discretionary trust, and the liquidity bridge account I had used for Emily's transfer. At 2:17 p.m., he called back. You were correct to call me, he said. I listened. The $120 million isn't sitting. It's staged. There's a routing trigger embedded in a side agreement, likely prepared by counsel you haven't met. The funds are set to split into 3 channels within 72 hours. 2 offshore. 1 domestic shell LLC formed 8 weeks ago. In whose name? Nominal director is a corporate proxy. But the formation IP traces back to Atlanta. I'm pulling deeper. Atlanta. I said nothing. Richard, Sam continued, there's something else. I'm seeing a draft insurance adjustment filed 2 months ago. What kind? A $150 million Keyman life insurance rider attached to your holding company. Primary beneficiary, Emily Miller. I closed my eyes briefly. And the effective date? Activated last week. Timing. Always timing. If you had died within 30 days of the transfer, Sam said carefully, Liquidity Plus Insurance would have positioned her with nearly immediate controlling interest over remaining structured assets. And there's a preliminary sales inquiry on your Cape Cod property. Listed as estate transition asset. Estate transition. I stood and walked to the hotel window. Keep digging, I said. I already am. That evening, Linda came to the hospital under the pretense of delivering Emily's phone charger. I met her in the parking garage. Tell me exactly what you heard, I said. She kept her eyes down. Miss Emily was in her office. On speaker. A man's voice. He said, once the wire clears, we move. You don't hesitate. She asked about dosage. He said it was calibrated for a 60-year-old male under stress. He called it a heart cocktail. Said it would look like grief and alcohol. And she? She said, after this, I don't have to ask permission anymore. Permission. Interesting word. Did you recognize the voice? No. But she called him Brian once. Brian. Atlanta. The lines were connecting. Thank you, I said. She looked at me then, fear mixed with something else. Are you going to tell her you know? No, I said calmly. Not yet. Emily was discharged 2 days later. I arrived before she was wheeled out. She looked fragile. Pale. Carefully composed. Dad, she said softly. I don't know what happened. I studied her face. There are tells when someone lies. Micro-tightening at the corners of the mouth. Breath control that's too deliberate. She was performing vulnerability. It was a reaction, I said evenly. We'll get the toxicology report. Her eyes flickered. Just once. You kept the glass? She asked. Yes. A pause. That's very, you. It was not affection in her tone. It was assessment. By the third day, Sam had more. Brian Wells, he said. Full name. 45. Self-described risk consultant. Based in Atlanta. Previously involved in 2 aggressive estate transition disputes. No convictions. Clean enough to operate. Dirty enough to know where the lines are. Any direct communication records? Encrypted messaging app. But I have metadata frequency. Heavy contact with Emily in the past 4 months. Spike in the last 3 weeks. And the Shell LLC? Registered to a trust instrument drafted by an attorney in Delaware. The attorney's retainer was paid from Emily's startup account, not personal funds. Clean layering. Calculated distance. Sam, I said quietly, if I had died that night, how quickly would the funds have moved? Within 48 hours. It's automated. And after? Your remaining board seats would have shifted through proxy voting. She'd control the holding company before anyone questioned the timeline. I nodded once. Continue, I said. That night, I returned to Emily's house. She insisted I stay for dinner. I feel terrible about what happened, she said. Maybe I pushed too hard. You've always pushed hard, I replied. She smiled faintly. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and garlic. Perfectly staged domestic calm. I noticed something new, a document folder on the counter embossed with a law firm name I didn't recognize. I didn't touch it. Instead, I walked casually through the living room and glanced at the security panel. I had installed those cameras a year ago. For safety, I'd told her. They were still active. And cloud-backed. She didn't know I had administrative access. After dinner, while she stepped outside to take a call, I opened the security app on my phone. I scrolled back to 2 days before the incident. There. Her office. Speakerphone on. A man's voice faint but audible. Dosage is calibrated. At his age, under stress, with alcohol. My pulse remained steady. Once the transfer clears, you don't hesitate. Emily's voice, lower. And after? After, you control the narrative. Control the narrative. I downloaded the clip immediately to an encrypted drive. Evidence. Real evidence. Not suspicion. Not interpretation. When she returned, she studied me. You're quiet tonight, she said. I'm thinking, I replied. About what? Legacy. She tilted her head. You don't have to worry about that anymore, Dad. I've got it. That was the moment I understood something with absolute clarity. She did not see me as father. She saw me as obstacle. As gatekeeper. As timing variable. And she believed the variable had been removed. What she didn't know was this. The glass swap had done more than save my life. It had exposed the architecture. And architecture collapses under light. I finished my wine. Stood. Kissed her on the forehead. I'm proud of you, I said evenly. And I meant it. Because ambition without conscience is predictable. And predictable opponents are manageable. When I left that house outside Boston that night, the decision was already made. I would not confront. I would not accuse. I would not warn. I would prepare. Publicly, I would remain the aging founder easing into retirement. Privately, I would document every wire, every message, every proxy maneuver. She believed the first move had been hers. She was wrong. The first move had been mine. I just hadn't taken it yet. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I did not even reduce contact. If anything, I became more present. Emily expected distance. Withdrawal. Emotional fracture. That is how most men react when they sense betrayal. Emotion exposes position. I gave her none. The morning after I downloaded the recording from her office security feed, I called my general counsel in Denver and requested a routine governance review of my holding company. Nothing dramatic. Just a formal audit of proxy authority, insurance riders, and board succession triggers. Everything all right? He asked. Routine hygiene, I said. In parallel, Sam Howard continued building the financial map. Every time Emily's account moved $1 from the $120 million, we captured the metadata. By day 4, $40 million had shifted into the Cayman vehicle. Another $35 million was staged through a Delaware shell. The remainder sat temporarily in a liquidity buffer pending automated release. Sam traced the control chain. The Delaware LLC routes to a discretionary trust, he said. Trustee of record, Brian Wells. There it was again. Atlanta. Any direct compensation to Emily? I asked. Not yet. This is positioning. Once you were out of the picture, distributions would look like restructuring. Restructuring. Such a clean word for theft. I instructed Sam to do something specific. Freeze nothing, I said. Interfere with nothing. Let it continue. You're sure? Yes. Because exposure requires motion. A stopped clock is difficult to prosecute. A moving mechanism documents itself. The toxicology report came back 5 days after the incident. The sedative compound was identified as a fast-acting benzodiazepine derivative combined with a cardiac stress enhancer. Legal in isolation. Lethal in combination under certain physiological profiles. Calculated. The dosage found in Emily's bloodstream was consistent with what would have been fatal to a 61-year-old male with a moderate alcohol load. I asked the physician one question. If the intended subject had consumed this instead of her, what would the timeline have looked like? 30 to 60 minutes, he replied. Cardiac arrhythmia escalating to arrest. It would resemble stress-induced failure. Stress. Grief. A man who lost his wife 5 years earlier. No autopsy flags unless someone asked very specific questions. I preserved a certified copy of that report. Evidence. Next came legal insulation. I quietly amended my will. Every direct controlling asset moved into an irrevocable charitable structure effective immediately upon my death. Not through Emily. Not through family succession. The primary beneficiary, the Helen Miller Oncology Research Endowment. Secondary triggers required dual board confirmation, none of whom included my daughter. My counsel reviewed the changes twice. You're restructuring aggressively, he noted. I believe in redundancy, I said. What I did not tell him was this. If Emily believed my death secured her control, that incentive needed to disappear before exposure. Remove motive. Then reveal intent. Meanwhile, Sam uncovered digital communications between Emily and Brian Wells through recovered cloud metadata. He could not decrypt content, not yet, but timestamps aligned precisely with the following events. The drafting of the insurance rider. The formation of the Delaware LLC. The wire transfer schedule. The day before the heart cocktail. Architecture. Layered. Deliberate. Richard, Sam said during one late call, this is prosecutable. Conspiracy. Financial fraud. Attempted homicide. Not yet, I replied. Why not? Because intent must be undeniable. And intent reveals itself best under confidence. Confidence was exactly what Emily displayed 2 weeks after the incident. She invited me to a private investor dinner in Boston. A small gathering. Venture capital, infrastructure players, one attorney I now recognized as the Delaware Trust drafter. I attended. I watched her speak. She was polished. Controlled. She described her company's future as post-founder autonomous. Post-founder. An interesting phrase for a living man. When the Delaware attorney shook my hand, his grip tightened slightly longer than necessary. "Your daughter is building something extraordinary," he said. "I hope it survives stress," I replied. His smile faltered, just briefly. They believed the operation was still intact. They believed the failed sedative event had been an unfortunate anomaly. They believed I had seen nothing. That belief was necessary. The final piece came from Linda. She approached me one afternoon while Emily was out. "There was a laptop," she said quietly. The man's voice. "They used it in the office. I think she forgot to remove something." I entered the office alone. The laptop was gone. But the router log was not. I accessed the administrative console. External remote login sessions. 3 originating IP addresses. 2 masked. 1 partially exposed, geolocated to Atlanta. Timestamp, 3 hours before the drink was poured. I exported the logs. Cross-referenced with Sam's communication spikes. Perfect alignment. I then did something unexpected. I scheduled a press interview. Nothing aggressive. A legacy piece. Founder reflects on transition and trust. A financial journal in New York City requested it months earlier. I agreed. Public visibility complicates quiet disappearances. The article ran with my photograph on the cover. Headline: Richard Miller, Experience Still Matters. Emily sent me a congratulatory text. Pride emoji. How fragile that word is. The final preparation was structural. I convened a private board session for my holding company under the pretense of annual review. All members present. Legal counsel present. Independent forensic accountant present. No mention of Emily. Yet. I delivered updated governance documents, insurance rider copies, wire trace documentation, router logs, toxicology report, and audio transcript excerpts to a secure evidence vault maintained by counsel. Sealed. Time-stamped. Witnessed. I was not building suspicion. I was building inevitability. On the 28th day after the glass swap, Sam called again. "Movement," he said. "The Cayman Fund is preparing disbursement. Scheduled for 48 hours from now. Final step." "Good," I replied. "Good?" "Yes. Because public collapse requires peak confidence." And they were at peak confidence. Emily believed the only thing that had failed was dosage. She believed the next stage was financial dominance. She believed I was slow. Old. Emotional. Distracted by grief. What she failed to account for was patience. The kind that does not shout. The kind that documents. The kind that waits for signatures to dry before pulling the floor from beneath the architects. I looked at the Charles River that evening from my hotel window in Boston and felt nothing resembling anger. Only precision. The exposure would not be loud. It would be clinical. Boardroom, not courtroom theatrics. Data, not accusations. And when it landed, it would not be reversible. Because silence is not weakness. It is the pause before execution. On the 30th day after the glass swap, the Cayman vehicle initiated its final routing sequence. At 9:02 a.m. $40 million began shifting from the offshore holding account toward a structured distribution instrument tied to the Delaware LLC. At 9:04 a.m., my board convened in the executive conference room of my holding company's headquarters in Denver. Emily was present by invitation. She arrived confident, composed, tailored navy suit, controlled expression. She believed this meeting concerned transitional governance and a formal announcement of her increasing role. She was correct. Just not in the way she expected. Brian Wells attended remotely from Atlanta. His camera was on. Polished background. Neutral tone. He introduced himself as Risk Advisory Consultant. I began the meeting precisely at 9:05. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "Today we finalize succession structure." Emily smiled slightly. I allowed that smile to exist for several seconds before continuing. "Before that, however, we need to review an irregularity involving a $120 million transfer." Her smile held. Controlled. "I assume this is procedural," she said lightly. "It is," I replied. I nodded to General Counsel. The forensic accountant activated the presentation screen. Slide 1, Wire Confirmation. Timestamped. My authorization. Slide 2, Embedded Side Agreement routing triggers I had never approved. Brian's expression did not change. Emily's posture shifted by 2 millimeters. Subtle. Slide 3, Insurance Rider. $150 million Keyman Policy. Beneficiary, Emily Miller. Activation date, 7 days before the transfer. A board member leaned forward. "I don't recall approving this rider," he said. "You didn't," I replied. Slide 4, Router Logs from Emily's home office. Remote session from Atlanta 3 hours before the sedative event. Slide 5, Toxicology Report. Dosage Comparison Chart. Silence entered the room. Not dramatic silence. Professional silence. The kind that arrives when facts align too cleanly. Emily's voice came carefully. "Dad, what is this?" I did not raise my voice. "This," I said evenly, "is architecture." The forensic accountant advanced the slide. Audio transcript excerpt from the office recording. Dosage is calibrated. At his age. The room shifted. Brian's video feed flickered. He adjusted his earpiece. "This is being taken out of context," he said smoothly. "Context?" I asked. I pressed play. The recording filled the boardroom speakers. "Once the wire clears, you don't hesitate." Emily's voice followed. "And after?" Brian's reply. "After, you control the narrative." No one spoke. Because there was nothing to interpret. I leaned back in my chair. "The Cayman disbursement scheduled for 9:02 has been intercepted," I said calmly. "It is currently frozen under court-supervised injunction." Emily turned sharply toward me. "You froze my capital?" "No," I said. "I froze conspiracy." Her composure cracked for the first time. "You're overreacting." This was restructuring. Risk mitigation. "You always taught me to." "I taught you discipline," I said quietly. "Not murder." The word did not echo. It landed. Brian disconnected. Too late. Our litigation counsel had already initiated formal proceedings in federal court. Conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Attempted homicide. Insurance manipulation. Wire fraud. All supported by documented evidence preserved over 4 weeks. Emily stood. "You would destroy your own daughter," she demanded. I held her gaze. "You attempted to destroy your father." There was no anger in my voice. Only record. By 11:30 a.m., federal authorities had executed a warrant at Brian Wells' office in Atlanta. His encrypted devices were seized. His accounts frozen. At 1 p.m., a formal complaint was filed with the district attorney in Boston based on jurisdiction of the poisoning attempt. Emily's counsel arrived before the meeting adjourned. She did not look at me as she left. Not once. The trial began 8 months later. 4 months of proceedings. Forensic toxicologists testified. Financial analysts detailed routing triggers. Cyber specialists explained remote login sessions. Insurance underwriters described suspicious rider timing. I testified for 97 minutes. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just chronology. Transfer. Whisper. Glass swap. Dosage. Routing. Recording. Intent. Emily claimed pressure. Claimed debt exposure. Claimed she had lost control of escalating investors. The jury listened. Then they read the transcript. After this, I don't have to ask permission anymore. Permission. That word again. The verdict was delivered in under 5 hours. Guilty on conspiracy. Guilty on attempted homicide. Guilty on wire fraud. Brian Wells received a federal sentence of 22 years. Emily received 12, with financial restitution orders attached to every remaining asset in her name. There was no screaming. No collapse. Just the quiet disintegration of someone who believed intelligence made her untouchable. I did not sell the house outside Boston. I did not liquidate my holdings. I restructured them. Every operational decision now requires dual fiduciary review. Every liquidity movement requires biometric confirmation. I established a capital protection advisory group for founders over 55, men and women who assume betrayal only happens to the careless. It does not. It happens to the trusting. Linda still works for me. I ensured she will never need to work again if she chooses not to. She saved my life with a whisper. People occasionally ask me how I felt when the sentence was read. I tell them the truth. I felt confirmation. Not victory. Not relief. Confirmation that experience still matters. That documentation defeats deception. That silence can be strategy. I lost my daughter long before the courtroom. What I preserved was something else. Dignity. And control over what I built. If anyone believes a quiet father is an easy variable in a financial equation, they should understand this. Age does not dull awareness. Grief does not erase discipline. And silence is never surrender. It is the pause before decision. My name is Richard Miller. I am 61 years old. And I am still very much in control.